Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of our NPCs Across the World. Today, our novice of Summoner was hired by a low level monster hunter who wanted to make some sort of pact with an entity to improve his skills. They go to a tavern, head to a secret summoning chamber, and as always, the elf summoner failed. Where he was supposed to summon a really powerful monster hunter, another person came through. She is the head scribe of the Love's Library. Looking at his book, he does see that she has some experience with monster hunters.
Welcome to a new episode. Today we have here Jasmine Yang. She's from Australia, and well, I would like for her to introduce herself, her career, what she has done. So, can you go ahead, Jasmine? Yeah, please.
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Jasmine Yang, and I publish on the DMs Guild under the name Drifters Game Workshop. I used to also publish under a different name before I transitioned, but I do go by Jasmine Yang now. You may know some of my works. My most popular one is the Hammond's Harvesting Handbook series, which features complete harvesting guides for all three monster books released by Wizards of the Coast for D&D 5e, as well as the popular nautical and seafaring book called Captains and Cannons. I've sold quite a lot of copies, and I'm among the top-selling authors on the DMs Guild.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Okay, so as you guys know, or maybe if this is your first video, our objective with this series is pretty much to build some intersectionality internationally within the community, and also from our side to bring the pretty much ignore South American view on RPGs and experience. So today's themes is content creation and community. Our first question for Jasmine is, how is the game scene in Australia? What games do you people play? Is it a lot of Dungeons and Dragons? Is there variety? A lot of indie scene?
Yeah, down in Australia, we got quite a growing grassroots community. It's not as large as other countries, just because in Australia, things just tend to be a little bit smaller because there's less people down here.
Yeah.
But it's just like any other place. People go to board game shops to hang out, and I think it was mostly focused on stuff like Magic the Gathering and Warhammer 40k before. But I think D&D is getting quite popular down here, especially because of Critical Role. And I think because the internet has started to help people play games virtually, it's starting to open it up a bit more for what Australians are able to connect to instead of being scattered around everywhere in our relatively small towns and cities. We can play a lot of other places. Unfortunately, we also are restricted by time zones, so it's a little hard sometimes to play with people overseas. But it is growing. Conventions down here, the D&D spaces are getting really, really big. We're getting like really cool dice stores coming down and like guesting at our conventions. It's I think it is growing down here.
Yeah, that's very good to hear. I like the comparison because at least in our the community that Sebastian and I belong to, it was also gathered around a hobby shop that for board games, card games, and of course RPGs.
Yes.
Maybe the biggest difference, while Magic the Gathering is very popular, I think that the main draw of these sort of these hobby stores here in where we live is card games in general, like Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic the Gathering, and a few others, Pokemon, and a few others. But there's not a lot of people playing like board games, and actually, interestingly enough, I think that the Warhammer 40K community is very small, and I mean that might be because of the acquisition power of people is not that high, and it's a very costly hobby. But the weird thing is that, unlike in other communities centered around RPGs, and we do have a community of RPGs that predates us even. Um,
Yes.
it is not exactly centered around D&D, and particularly not D&D 5th edition, because most of the DMs started previously, either with
Second edition
D&D 3rd,
or second
yeah,
edition.
second edition, third edition, Pathfinder, this kind of stuff, and there is a lot more people playing World of Darkness games. So I think that here it really is more balanced. Well, I have seen that in other countries, it's not even a competition between D&D fifth edition and anything else. What we do not have much of is people playing indie games, games that are not very well known. I personally have tried to at least personally change that with the few people that play with me, but I'm just one person. So, but we are trying. Like us, the group, we try to sometimes make events. They have been online because this is an initiative that started last year, and of course, with the whole deal, it has to be online. But we have tried to push people to try new games, and it hasn't gone the best that we have hoped for, because people are always like, "Oh, but you're not going to have this game I want to play, so I won't play," and that has been a bit of a problem there. But I mean, we're trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same happens in my group as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now I am in Canada, and from the little experience I've had here, COVID, it is not really that different. Yeah, I know that, throughout the decades, it is pretty much been dungeons versus whoever. I think it was Palladium on the 80s, Old World Darkness on the 90s, Pathfinder on the early 2000s, and I don't know against who, in the 2010s. But yeah, it is pretty much just always dungeons versus whoever, and if you are not focused on D&D, um, it's yeah, you kind of have to deal with that and like look for small communities. And even here, in North America where I am, it's pretty much the same. You have like little clusters of groups that don't play Dungeons and Dragons and go full indie. You have even people that they pay game designers. Come here. We want a game for of whatever. Like I don't know. Like we want to, hunt monster girls, and they're like really niche games, and they're like design that game for us so they can
Hmm.
play it. Which is really interesting when you think it. I've never really heard of that, and you're gonna probably hear that, guys, on our next video with our next guest.
Hmm.
But yeah, it is pretty much just always D&D and everything else. And if you're not on the D&D side, it is a little bit harder.
Hmm.
But yes, I have seen like a lot of people getting into the hobby because it has become more accessible. For presentation, the rules are lighter, are easier to get
Hmm.
into, and also it seems everybody is playing it because either
Hmm.
Critical Role, online
Critical Role.
platforms, yeah, everybody is more welcoming to try. Before, I don't know, maybe
Hmm.
7 years down the road, in the past, or 10 years, people were like, yeah, no, no, that seems complicated. But now, like, everybody's playing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot more guides. more ways to make it easier for people, and you don't really have to read everything to be able to play it if you have like a understanding and a GM that's going to walk you through it. I think that's important. So I think that we can move on to the next question here.
Yeah.
Um, so, so having experienced the RPG community from one point of view, certain standard, and then you transition from there to another standard in the community, and you also became a creator. Um, what can you tell us about all of this experience? How it has maybe affected you, and what can the community in general and the event organizers and everything can what can they learn from it? Maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously, I'm a trans woman,
Hmm.
and my books were published under my old name before I did transition, and
Hmm.
my old Twitter account, at Drifter Workshop, uh, was also under my old name. Uh,
Hmm.
so, and then I came out very publicly at the start of the year, and so far, actually, the community has been really great about that.
That's good.
They have, followed my name change very well. I haven't seen anyone like badmouth me or anything like that. I think that the D&D community, by and large, other than like a few outliers, are relatively
Hmm.
progressive and pretty accepting of people like me. Um, it is weird but it is still very much, I think, a male-dominated
Yeah,
space. So as
definitely.
nice as they are about accepting me as a trans woman, there is still a little bit of misogyny that I see creeping in now that I'm interacting with it as a woman. And
Hmm.
it's a little strange because, when I change my personal profile picture to a woman and I try to interact with, D&D spaces, sometimes I get
Hmm.
people like explaining stuff, like explaining the rules or, shouting down my suggestions on things. And it is a little strange. Um, and, yeah, like, and I don't think there are a lot of top female creators in the space right now in the DMs Guild. By and large, it's quite
Male dominated.
dominated as well. And I think is just a huge shame. I think I really want more female creators to have the resources and influence and connections to try and make it big on the space because I think there's a lot of great ideas.
Yeah.
Um, I think when it comes to like community events, I think a lot of stuff is just making sure that everyone is fine, making understanding there are different communication rules and communication guidelines we should be sticking to. So, asking for pronouns, asking for
Hmm.
what's okay, what's not okay, vetoing certain topics if they're uncomfortable with it.
Certainly.
But overall, I think it just creates a more inclusive and diverse space. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. So basically, uh, I mean that I honestly want to say that I feel very happy for you that you have found such an accepting space. Um, that that really is good to hear because sometimes you hear all these stories about how sometimes um, GMs or players they tend to not be very nice to people. Some are very bad at being, accepting of others and everything. So it's good that at least if the community in general tends to go more for the, being good people, being pleasant and accepting of others. And I've been thinking because I I mean I am not going to say that I know that how it is for the people here, but in general the situation is a lot um, it's a lot harder because the society in general is a lot more conservative, and even our gaming groups, they usually involve older people that, even if they don't want to say that they are more conservative, that they actually are in these topics. So yeah, it it seems to me like it's going to be a lot harder for someone to come out as a member of the LGBT community in general, in these spaces. But I can hope that at least people like me who accept that, who are in favor of that, can provide at least some sort of safe space, maybe somehow, is what I would like to um, is what I would like to give back to the community, if it comes to that. So I want to ask about this. Maybe if there's any suggestion or um, anything maybe that you would like to tell people who are maybe thinking of transitioning publicly, or maybe coming out uh, and who are into the hobby. Maybe any experience you want to share with them is.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think you should just take the plunge and do it. Like I think the best way to think about it is that it's your space too. Like
Mhm.
it doesn't belong to anyone, and you deserve to be there. And just have confidence and assurance that by being who you are making the space better, and
Yeah,
no one can tell you otherwise. Like it's
yeah.
no one to tell you that you don't belong because of your
Mhm.
identity.
Exactly. And well, I mean, I don't want to maybe talk over anything, but I think that even in a general level, if you are yourself and maybe you don't see the response that you wanted, then maybe that was not like that was a bit of a toxic environment anyways for you to be in, and that makes itself apparent. And yeah, and you can then just be yourself however you want.
Yeah. It is, I mean, that's a pretty standard like thing across the board, like even outside of just tabletop games,
Mm-hmm.
for anyone, not even just LGBT, but any minority
Yeah,
really.
exactly.
Um, Honestly, that's why once again, I want to see more LGBT representation and women representation in like DM's Guild creator space, because
Mm-hmm.
it's like if they're not going to do it for us, like if they're not going to include that representation or that kind of safe space and inclusion, then
Mhm.
we have to do it ourselves. Which is why
Yeah,
I was really proud to come out and show that there is someone very
exactly.
influential on the website that is
Mm-hmm.
a trans.
Yeah. That's
Oh,
very important.
okay. So, the little that I can add to the question, which is kind of secondhand experience from some friends of mine, and things I have seen online. That is, yeah, inside like South America being a really Catholic place, everybody's really ingrained with these ideas, and many of us have to unlearn them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, many people in the community, especially all the members, might have some sort of biases. But I do
Mm-hmm.
have seen that, newer people getting into the hobby again, because of all this change on the platforms, critical role, etc. They are more welcoming, and maybe they do not really engage much with the community, and all across maybe from Mexico to Argentina, and maybe some other country. If this is your case. Yeah, like all these welcoming spaces are kind of forming liminally to the original groups, or like to the the first comers to the hobby. So yeah, there is a challenge there, getting the old people, the old gamers to relearn these things, and open their minds, and leave the hate behind, however you want to
Mm-hmm.
call it, and build a better community. I am seeing that, for example, in Mexico, a lot of feminist creators, especially women, some queer people are really spearheading the hobby as it is. You don't really see like old people, or at least many old, let's say, close-minded people, really creating content or being out there like leading the community. So I do believe like if people welcoming open-minded people, take the stand and lead the community, that's a way to make it more welcoming.
Now that we have talked about the communities, your experiences with that, now I think that it's time to move on to content creation.
Yeah.
Um, so we would like to know more about the feeling and the journey of content creation, like as a practice. Um, based based on your experience of performing this creative act, what can it provide to other people's games, and what it provides to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, all of my work started as like things from my own games. Like
Hmm.
I had a nautical campaign and I didn't like the current ship rules in D&D, so I made my own, and that was Captains and Cannons.
Hmm.
Um, I found that my players kept wanting to harvest things in my games, and I was sick of making things up on the spot, so I made Hammond's Harvesting Handbook.
Hmm.
Um, I mostly just make stuff that I think players are going to need, and that they're going to enjoy. So everything I make is focused on will this have an impact on the table, and is this easy to use? Is this useful for people? Is this something that is going to improve their game?
Hmm.
And everything else that I make is just cut. Like I just don't bother putting it in, because there's no need for it.
Okay.
And a lot of it, and it is a very different experience because I am also a professional writer. Like I write for shows and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and it is a very different process writing something like this compared to other fiction writing, because it is very creative, but it's also um,
Technical.
very technical in another sense. Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of the times when I'm writing things down, it almost feels like I'm writing code. Um,
Mm.
because like there are a lot of rules you have to work around. There are very
Yeah.
specific language that you have to use when like writing things
Hmm.
down. Otherwise,
Yeah.
things will have weird interactions, and you'll get a
Exactly.
customer that says that an item is completely broken because didn't intend on
Mm.
you didn't balance it correctly because it has some
Exactly.
weird wording that lets it do something crazy. So it is very different, but it is very enjoyable because you get to fully flex like every part of your brain. There's the creative aspect where you're creating items, you're creating worlds, situations, characters, and then there's the other part where you're trying to figure out how is this going to play into the game? How is this how does this item actually work? What is the mechanic that underlies it? And I really enjoy that.
Right. So yeah, that what you mentioned is interesting because it is something that happens a lot of time. And now that you mentioned code, I can see the like the how that fits together, because I personally am a software engineer, so I can relate to that, and that you really need to watch um, what you say, in not just not just in terms of maybe lore and things like that, but as you said, balance and everything. And I personally have noticed that has been an issue in some more indie games that I have played. So as a player, I can notice that. But since you have been on the other side, on the creation side, uh, I, I can see now how hard it can be to to maybe prevent that from happening, um, and how important it is, because it can really mess things up.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
mhm.
weird. Like there are some really simple items that like I know what it does. Like when I came up with the item, but it's taken me like 3 hours to actually write it out because I can't figure out the correct wording to make it actually function within the game. And it is really hard. Sometimes I have to do some really creative ways. And honestly, once again, it feels like when I did learn some coding, like this is a very roundabout solution on how to get the item to actually do what I want within the game rule mechanics, but it works.
Yeah, exactly. Like you make it work, and that's I think that's where the experience comes from. Because if I try to do that, it's not going to go well. I don't. I've been a bit interested in making my own things for a while, especially after trying out indie games, because this is something I talked about a bit in the last video. But when you play a lot of maybe what's professional in the being made by a big company like Wizards of the Coast or White Wolf or Paizo, wherever, you maybe don't see just how far you can go by yourself. Maybe you don't realize it, but once you start digging into the indie side of things, homebrew, um, maybe games made by companies, but smaller companies that are like just one person and artists and things. But you start to realize, hey, maybe I could also do something great. Maybe I could also do something nice. And you try it out, and well, it's not going to be easy. You're maybe not going to like blaze through it as you might want. It's going to take some work, but you can do it. And um, I know that you went for through that sense of like going from the idea to actually putting in the work to then seeing your work be published and making the rounds, being bought by other people, talked about, and everything. And how was that process for you? Like I know how you like what was your the thing that made you take the plunge, but how was the process like when you started? How did you feel about it, and how did you feel when you were working on it, doing all this process, and maybe thinking, because I know what sometimes creators feel like, oh, this is going to be so much work. I will never get this done, and things like that. How did you overcome that? And also, what did you feel at the end when you actually finished it, published it, and people started buying it and all that stuff?
Yeah, I'm a very obsessive person and a bit of a perfectionist. And yes, as I said, everything that I made, it started as like a homebrew in my own game. Like it's very simple rules that I just made in order to get what I wanted in my game.
Mhm.
When I made Captains in Cannon, which is my first one, the ship combat rulebook, I never intended on it making any money. My goal was just I'm gonna make back the money I spent on the cover art licensing, and that's it. And that was like I needed to make like $80, which was like 20 sales or something.
Mhm.
It's gone well beyond 20 sales. And like it honestly blew me away. Like when I hit 20 sales within the first 2 days, and I was like, oh,
Mhm.
well, okay, I'll be happy with that.
Good.
And then within a week, it sold like more than 100, and then it was selling more than 1,000 within a few months, and then it's still selling today. And I'm still freaking out because, if 4 years ago, I think it was 4 years ago when I started working on it already, um, I was just making something, and it just kept growing and growing into this thing. And even while I was making it, I was like putting so much effort into it, and I
Mhm.
didn't even know where I was really going to go. And I kept wondering, am I putting in way too much effort into something that
Mhm.
no one's probably even going to read? And I think really that is the key to my books, is that
Mm-hmm.
I don't really make it with the sole intention of like profit or, really anything special. I just make something that I want to make and that
Mm-hmm.
I think other people are going to want to enjoy. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really all that drives me to do it. So, and once
Okay.
again, with the harvesting handbook, I didn't know if anyone actually wanted. Because there
Mm-hmm.
are actually like some free harvesting guides out there already. There was actually somebody who released some harvesting guides already, and I thought, oh, people are just gonna go with that one. But I guess I'll just release my one anyway, and it's done really well. And I think part of that is just because I put in a lot of stuff that I want to see, and there's a lot of passion behind it, and that's
Mm-hmm.
about it.
That's great. That's great to hear. And maybe that last comment you had can take us to the next question, because you talked about how because you released something that you found out that had already like it was a niche that already had other competitors in it. Um, and you didn't really intend it to like compete, but it did anyways, which is interesting because that shows that people appreciate choice, appreciate that they can maybe, well, there are these different harvesting guides, and I'm going to try them all to see which suits my game best, and that's probably something that really happens. And so the question would be, regarding the original content, how do you manage the increasing complexity of the game when new content or rules are added versus the game experience? And I think this is talking about official things, but
Yeah.
also I also wonder about other homebrew things.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So as I said, like everything I make is something that I would want to see on my table. Like whenever I make anything, the first thing I always think of is it actually usable by a
Mhm.
table? So let's go back to my very first thing, Captains and Cannons, the ship
Mm.
combat. Um, Wizards of the Coast had actually, they already had very basic ship rules in the Dungeon
Mhm.
Masters Guild, in the Dungeon Masters Guide. It didn't work very well for ship combat though. It
Mhm.
was pretty much just like travel time, so that was okay. Then they also released, they had their own ship combat rules as well. And as I was reading them, I thought, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't seem to really work. It doesn't have like the feeling that I would want
Mhm.
in my game. It was very slow. It was very clunky. It didn't really focus on the ships at all. It didn't really integrate the players with the ships, so
Mhm.
on and so forth. And so, as I was writing Captains and Cannons, I kept thinking like, well, how do I want to play? How would I enjoy it at my table? And I carry that with pretty much all the homebrew stuff I do. Like with the harvesting guides, as I said, there were other people who already existed before, and I do read them, and I think to myself, you know what? If I use this at my table, I would feel unsatisfied, like because there's just things that are missing from it that I would want. Maybe other people are fine with it, but this is what I want to put in. And yeah, like and I do test a lot of the things I do quite extensively.
Mhm.
I always imagine like, okay, if I'm sitting down and using my guide, is this usable? Is this useful? And is this what I want?
Mhm. Interesting. Do you have anything to add, Sebas?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, regarding the not so much the complexity of the game, but the balance of the game, because game is designed on a basic power level. So there are things that don't break the game. So when you
Mhm.
are designing new rules and putting things that are new, how do you really manage that? So bringing a
Oh,
new
yeah,
thing doesn't
yeah,
break anything.
that's also another thing. Is when it came to power level, I because I know that if I made something unbalanced, that would be the thing that everyone would talk about.
Mm.
Like, I think some players are fine with complexity in their rules, but if something is unbalanced, they will complain about it just endlessly. So I pretty much like look at everything. Like it's very easy to come up with like abilities, but like the devil's in the details when it comes to that. So I would always check, like double check against 1,000 other things. Like I read when I was making the harvesting handbook guides and writing all those craftable items and homebrew items, I think I ended up reading the list of established magical items in the DM's guide like 10 times, looking for like benchmarks of, all right, how much damage is this allowed? All right, how much abilities is a very rare item allowed to do? What is the power level of a rare item? And that took a lot of work to rebalance everything in line with Wizards of the Coast items. And as I was doing that, I actually found Wizards of the Coast themselves are pretty all over the place when it comes to their balance, to be honest. Like a lot of their items, like between rarities, are very inconsistent with how powerful they are. And that did give me a bit of leeway, but I tried to keep that as a benchmark. But when it came to like complexity of the game, I tried to always make sure that everything I do is intuitive and very easy. Like I've read some other guides on ship combat, and they are just way too complicated to use. There's so much bookkeeping. I don't know if you guys played 4E. That's where I started, and
I've heard stories.
yeah, anyone who played 4E can tell you that like there are 1,000 bonuses and everything, and bookkeeping just got very, very complicated. And I wanted to avoid that with 5 because I know the philosophy of 5e is simplicity, intuitive.
Simplicity. Yeah.
Players can sit down and start playing really easily. And I always try to keep to that.
Yeah, simplicity really is the name of the game in the modern let's say design, where the designs are heading for most games is what I have noticed. At least it all tends to be more simple, and well, there's something for everybody, but I have seen a lot more freeform games now than what I had seen before. So now to really cap off this question, it's something very simple. Has any of the um, material, the official material that has been released after you published your book, has it affected this balance or anything that you had created before? Because that I think that could be a worry there.
Yeah,
That's a good question.
that is actually always a worry. Because what one thing that always came up over and over again is because Wizard of the Coast officially released the Artificer after I released the Harvesting Handbooks. And obviously there's a lot of overlap between there because there's craftable items in the Harvesting Handbooks, and Artificers are very linked into that.
Yeah.
And every other day I would get a fan asking me the question, are you going to update this for Artificers? And every single day I would have to say, I have no idea because I have no idea how to do that. It's like my book did not take them into account.
Yeah, of course.
And even then, like with number 3, where I did try, I'll admit, like I'm not very satisfied. It's a very band-aid solution to incorporating Artificers, because simply like the rules that I have for the crafting and everything in the Harvesting Handbooks, they're not very compatible with the rules set up in the Artificer.
Official rules, yeah.
Yeah, it's so difficult to put that in. Other times it's a little easier, like Captains and Cannons. Like you can pretty much just choose to either use my ship rules or Wizard of the Coast ship rules, and that's fine. And one thing that I did try to keep in writing my books was actually trying to future-proof them. So like I tried to establish like as few rules that would clash with other things as possible. And I think that is actually a philosophy that Wizards of the Coast have kept to 5e very well. Like everything is sort of like its own modular piece that you can stick together without just creating this Frankenstein of a rule book. Things just sort of like stick onto a base game without touching each other, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That's exactly the opposite to how it works in World of Darkness. So I know what you mean.
As far as I'm aware, like things that Wizards of the Coast make in the future can't
Mhm.
possibly touch the Harvesting Handbook, because the rules that I've established in the Hammond's Harvesting Handbook don't clash with anything or change anything in the player's handbook or DM's guide. It just
Okay,
adds on to it.
adds to them.
Yeah. So
Okay,
if they make anything else in the future, like if they make another item or if they make another class, it shouldn't really clash with
okay,
the Harvesting Handbook.
okay. That's important. That's an important thing to know. Yeah,
No,
something I hadn't really considered, but now that I think about it, yeah.
yeah, that's a really good like philosophy.
So I think that that's about as much as we had, or do you think
Yeah,
we?
yeah, there was a third question, but I think we pretty much covered it.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, there was a wild card question if you want to use it. If you have any question for us,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like how's the scene like where you guys are? Like you guys asked me about Australia. Like
Hmm.
I actually know very little about the scene in other countries.
All right. So, particular here where I live, we are both Colombian. Um, we basically our community is based around a city named Barranquilla, and the community is rather small, but it has been built up through the years. And there are, of course, many different communities in the city, but basically, we have the community had been building itself up through the last few decades. Um, there were some game masters that they they had a lot of experience playing, among themselves, and they started to come together and start making events, like for example events in parks, that like they would go to a park and they would set up there at different, like, picnic tables, and well, not tables, but they would set up on the floor and play there in the park with people, very different games, both World of Darkness and Dungeons and Dragons, uh,
Cthulhu.
yeah, and other things. And eventually that grew into the conventions, when we start having conventions here, because that's relatively new. Um, Relatively new, yeah. The whole convention part in this side of the country, um, and then that started expanding. Eventually, they got a store, a hobby store, where it was basically the only hobby store that actually had like people playing tabletop RPGs, because most of the other ones just sold
Merchandise.
anime merchandise and maybe card games and
Yeah.
video games. But this store is where the community really started coming together.
Yeah, I think that you pretty much explained like the situation on the city we lived, but like,
And that's there we
yeah,
live. Yeah.
on the country, a weird thing about Colombia is that for some reason the capital is right in the center of the country, so for everything just goes to the capital and then just goes
It's pretty
everywhere.
centralized.
Yeah, so that centralization really caught most of the international products and like cultures and
Hmm.
hobbies from most of the country. So
Yeah,
if you go to the capital, you're going to see like they were playing board games, Warhammer, role playing games like
etc.
from the 80s. We even have like this store that has like mint condition 80s books and 90s books on the
Yeah,
capital, which is crazy, super cheap.
but we do not live in the capital,
Yeah,
so
yeah. So
it's
like
yeah.
if you were anywhere else, it was gonna be harder because
Hmm.
also the culture for some reason in every other part of the country was more conservative, more close-minded. than the capital.
Exactly.
So pretty much every
It
city is like
slowed things down.
it is self-contained, and they all like there is not like an unity between the whole country. Obviously in the capital you're going to find like more indie games, not much, but you're going to find more things. Yeah, that's pretty much, yeah, and that's pretty much like the difference.
Yeah, that's the gist of it.
Yeah, the because of the hobby store, and all the information, all these online games and podcasts, it has grown in the coast, where
Hmm.
Nagibi is right now, and many other cities.
Hmm.
But there is a lack of unity.
Yeah, we're trying to bridge that, but yeah, it's not been easy.
Yeah, and there is some competition for some reason between cities. Like everybody wants to be like
Apparently,
the leader, and like there is nobody is really helping each other. But yeah,
yeah, but
we're
that
working on
that's
that.
that's more apparent in like in the central cities. We had no idea of that until we were basically told it was happening. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, that was
But
funny.
anyway, that's basically the gist of how our little community is made up. And yeah, we mostly play Dungeons and Dragons and World of Darkness. World of Darkness is very popular, but old World of Darkness, like the classic ones. The Chronicles of Darkness is not very popular, not very well known. I play it. A few other people play it. Not many others.
Yeah,
And people.
that's pretty much because of the consumption patterns in South America. Like maybe I mean in countries that have like a more acquisitive power, like throwing out the old things and buying new ones, it's easier. But
Hmm.
we make things last because we cannot buy that many things. So if you
Exactly.
go into the 90s where there was this booming RPGs, and you go into Darkness Vampire, Werewolf, it's 3.5, early 2000s, you're not gonna
Hmm.
change it. The same way
Hmm.
you make like a fan last 25 years, you're gonna make that game last 25 years.
Yeah, when he says a fan, he literally means like a fan for
For the heat.
for the heat. Yeah,
You're gonna fix the
it's
thing till it
yeah,
crumbles to the ground.
yeah. We tend to fix things instead of replacing them. Is what he means. Yeah, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Any parting words do you want to have?
No, just thank you so much for having me.
It was
Okay, thank you so very much for being here and talking to us
yeah,
and sharing your experiences. They're very valuable. I think that you have made great contributions to the Dungeons and Dragons community, and I hope that you can continue creating new things
yeah,
and see more from you in the future.
yeah.
Uh,
So
yeah.
as the Head Scribe walks the portal, the little monster hunter asks a lot of questions. It happens, that she knew this guy named Hammond, who is
Hmm.
an amazing monster hunter. So this guy got a lot of cues and tricks and advice. Happy with this hint, strange event, the monster hunter goes to improve his work, and the novice of summoner managed to close the portal. Thank you again, for joining on our second video. And as you know, we post every month on the second week.
Hmm.
It was, if you have any questions, if you have any recommendations, any sort of subject you want to hear about, we will look for some guests for that. So yeah, comment down below, and thank you for coming. Bye bye.
Bye bye.